Thank you so much for the introduction, and I'll start off by thanking the organizers for putting together this amazing event, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. So as already mentioned, my name is Anna. I'm Research Culture Manager at eLife, and I will use this opportunity today to talk a little bit about the eLife model. eLife has been mentioned today already a couple of times, so I hope you are familiar with what eLife what we try to do at eLife when it comes to reimagining peer review, and I'll offer an explanation of the model, how peer review works at eLife, and also I'll talk about how it's been received so far by the scientific community and what the next steps are for our model. So that's the outline of my talk. So I'll talk about the eLife model. It has been around now for about 2 years, but it is still, in the grand scheme of things, relatively new. Not that many people know about it, and I know that there are a few misconceptions here and there about what we do, so hopefully I'll be able to iron these out today. And I'll explain why we've introduced this model and what we're trying to achieve with it. I'll talk about the feedback from the research community and the next steps. So, for those of you who don't know, we are an independent non-profit. We were established in 2012. Initially, we were fully funded non-profit by HHMI and Wellcome and Max Planck. We also had other funders who have supported our work. So while we have a few different arms, such as technology or communities, our sort of core business is publishing reviewed preprints in the life and biomedical sciences. We also develop open source platforms, and that was mentioned today in the keynote. These platforms support the review, organization, and dissemination of research. And for example, MetaRaw are using this platform to publish in the same way that we do. We also aim to promote openness, integrity, equity, diversity, and inclusion in everything that we do. And from the very start, we were tasked by our funded partners to change how publishing works. And that was sort of the mission that we followed ever since our inception. So we were not meant to be just another journal in life and biomedical sciences. We were meant to be doing things that are different. So that's what we're trying to do. So what is the eLife model? And why is it so innovative? So that's a kind of a pictorial depiction of what the eLife model is, illustrated in 5 steps. So as you can see, it starts with submission and ends with a version of record, which is basically equivalent to a traditional publication. So when you look at it that way, it's not very different from a traditional publication process, but the steps in between is where the innovation happens. So let me explain how we innovate. There we go. So I think we start with submission. There we go. So when step 1 in the process is submission. So we only accept submission of preprints. So either the author can send us a URL of the preprint that's already been submitted to something like bioRxiv, or they can send us their manuscript and then we will submit it to a preprint server for them. So the paper is already submitted as a preprint, and once it's happened, it will be screened by our editorial team, so our senior editors together with our reviewing editors, to decide whether it's a good candidate to be sent for peer review. Now, it's important to state here that it is not equivalent to peer review, so the editors are not meant to be scrutinizing the paper in detail. They are meant to look at the paper to see whether it is a good candidate for peer review. Can we provide good quality peer review? Is it an interesting paper that the community will want to read? So once the editors have decided to send it to peer review, then the peer review happens. So the authors at that point can actually relax, because then the peer review will not end in rejection or acceptance. We've eliminated that decision, so we no longer make that decision. If we've decided to send the paper to peer review, it will be published no matter what the reviewers think about it. What's more, the peer review process is consultative, so that's something that was mentioned in the previous talk. So the reviewers, once they have a look at the paper, they can talk to each other, and that eliminates the problem of authors getting conflicting opinions from reviewers. and trying to squeeze two sets of recommendations into one paper that are perhaps incompatible. So the reviewers, at the end of this peer review process, the reviewers put together the peer reviews, and that's the kind of the output of this process. You've got the peer reviews, which are public, and you have the paper, which we call reviewed preprint, which is published, and also there is an eLife assessment, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. And then there is the publication. The peer-reviewed preprints appears on our website, and together with the reviews, if there is an author response available at that point, it will appear as well on the website for everyone to read. And then there will be the assessment, which is sort of a nuanced, short, kind of succinct evaluation of the paper, which evaluates each paper on two dimensions. One is the significance of findings, the other one is the strength of evidence. I'm going to talk about that in just a second in a little bit more detail. So that's the kind of the path of publication from submission to publication. And I've kind of got to the blue dot at this point, which is where the reviewed preprint is published. And at that point, the authors have a choice of what they want to do. So they can either decide to revise the paper, in which case the paper will go back to the reviewers to be reviewed again, and then another set of peer reviews will be produced and again publicly available for everyone to see. But the authors might decide that they want to go straight to VOR, so version of record, because it might be that they no longer have funding, no longer have time. They just don't want to invest any more of the effort. The paper is not going to be any better than it is now. So they may decide that actually, thank you for the reviews, but this is it. Or they can even decide to send the paper to another journal. So they've got quite a lot of choice at that point. Now, it's important to point here that about 96% of our authors actually do revise their papers and receive the second set of reviews. Excuse me. Once the paper is published, this is what it looks like. So you can see it is clearly marked. I know that it's quite small print, but you can see at the very top, that is a reviewed preprint because it is clearly marked as such. And you can see which version it is. And you can click through the versions and you can see version 1, version 2, and version of record when it's published. You can have a look at the peer reviews under its own tab, and the eLife assessment is just above the abstract. And as I mentioned, the eLife assessment will assess the paper on the two dimensions. And it's difficult to miss because it just sits there above the abstract. Each of the reviewed preprints has got their own DOI and is citable straight away. And that's the common vocabulary that we use for our eLife assessments. So these eLife assessments are written by the editors, and they will assess each paper on two dimensions. Significance of findings can go for landmark, which is findings with profound implications and widespread influence, all the way to none for findings with no anticipated impact. And then the strength of evidence is assessed from exceptional, which is exemplary use of existing and new methods, all the way to inadequate, where methodology does not provide support for the primary claims. So, what are we trying to achieve with this model? So we believe that our model is better than the traditional model, and these are all the different reasons why. So I'll go through each of them in turn. First of all, the process is faster. So from submission to publication takes around 3 months for a paper to appear on our website. In the traditional model, it's about 9 months, because you can imagine that sort of in the background, all the reviews are happening before the paper is published officially on the website. Because we don't reject papers, it's also a saving when it comes to author time, because there is no sort of rejection after waiting for months and months and months for a peer review and only having to submit again to another journal. Sometimes it may take years for a paper to be published. and I have had that experience myself. So we also believe that our model is good for science because each paper receives a very nuanced assessment, and it's assessment for experts in the field. It's not a proxy assessment. You're not looking at, oh, it was published in that journal, that's why it must be good. It's an assessment that's specific to each paper. It's also transparent. You can have a look at all the reviews, you can have a look at all the versions, so you can make your own mind up about the value of each of the papers. We think it's good for scientists because scientists can still document their productivity when publishing with us. The version of record is equivalent to a published paper. But also we are assessing each paper, so scientists can, for example, when they're applying for promotion or applying for tenure, they can evidence that their papers are good, again, not because they publish in Nature or in a journal with a high impact factor, but because that particular paper is landmark or is solid. So that is a benefit for scientists. They can showcase their achievement that way. The process is more transparent. You've seen already that everything happens in the public eye. So the peer reviews are open. You can track the whole progress of the paper. You can read all the versions. You can see what revisions have been done to version 1 versus version 2 versus version of record. So it is much more transparent than the traditional publication system where you will never see the reviews, you will never see the letters, etc. You could also see that the authors have much more control than in a traditional system. So in a traditional system, you kind of feel you have to implement the recommendations of the reviewers, even if you don't agree, just because obviously you may face rejection if you don't do that. So in our system, the authors have more control. They can say, well, actually, I don't agree, so I'm not going to implement this recommendation. It may result that their assessment is not going to be updated to a better assessment as a result of that decision, but that's their decision to make. So that's obviously significantly better than having your hands tied when it comes to having to implement things that you don't agree with. And finally, we believe our system is offers an increased value. We do charge an APC for publishing with us, but compared to at least some of the major publishers, our fee is still competitive, and we do offer full waivers for anyone who can't afford our APCs. And what's more, our model does not only offer increased values when it comes to money, but also in terms of academic time. So academics don't have to waste all this time going through the repeated review processes of reformatting their papers when they're submitting to journals. So that's also, it's often more valuable than the monetary value of the APC. And I'm just going to very quickly mention of how we are trying to promote equity, diversity, and inclusion. I said before that we're taking this very seriously, this mission. And there are two things that I wanted to highlight here. First of all, we have an early career reviewer pool, which just go to our website and it will pop up straight away when you open the website. So just wanted to highlight some of the social media responses that we got. You can see here that people are quite excited about our assessments. They think that the way we handle the peer review and the fact that we don't reject or accept is refreshing because it removes the stress from authors. And also the consultative peer review is likened to having a journal club with 3 experts in the field talking to each other, which I guess is how science should work. And then we have some case studies. We talked to our authors, as I said. We've published quite a lot of case studies about our authors' experience with the model. So the opinions are positive. Authors value the transparency, the opportunity to have control over the publication process, and also they mentioned that having this open peer review means that the reviews tend to be more constructive and it creates sort of a nourishing culture. So next steps, just to finish off, what are we doing next? So the eLife model is over 2 years old. As I mentioned, we have published over 12,000 reviewed preprints so far. Doesn't mean that everyone now knows about our model. We've also faced some criticism from the scientific community. Obviously, change is difficult. It was to be expected. And we know that innovation doesn't come without its challenges. You may have heard that as a result of our model being so innovative, the Web of Science and Scopus decided to change the way they index our papers. And obviously, we expected that to happen because it kind of conflicts with how they sort of pick papers that they want to pick, journals that they want to index. So some scientists were worried that it's going to impact how their eLife publications are going to be viewed when it comes to promotion and general assessment of their work. So we went and spoke to institutions. We spoke to hundreds and hundreds of institutions and funders, and it doesn't seem to be the case that us being indexed in a different way has changed how institutions and funders look at people's eLife papers. And we've published 2 articles to tell the scientific community about it. So hopefully we are going to see the movement growing. We would really like to see people starting to use the eLife assessments in things like assessment of researchers' work. So if anyone has had experience of them being used in assessment, either informally or formally, we would really like to hear about it. And as our executive director, Damien Pattinson, said, we're in a strong position to keep this momentum going and are working with others who wish to see reform in researcher assessment. So with that, I'm going to finish. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I welcome any questions you might have. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Anna. It was very comprehensive in quite a short time. We do have time for a question. If anybody would like to ask, I think we've got at least one at the back there. If someone could, and one at the front. I'll come to you.
Hello, Nick Shepherd, University of Leeds. I just want to ask, one of the challenges we've had at Leeds is that I think UKI funds can only be used for a VOR, and in this model, as I understand, then there is not necessarily going to be a VOR, which can cause a problem in that workflow. Is that something else you've experienced, or have you got any sort of ideas how to mitigate that? Or has it affected sort of publishing through that route with other universities?
When it comes to the VORs, it kind of affects our funding as well, because we obviously we sort of get access to our funding when the VOR is a VOR rather than being a review preprint. So obviously, you know, the authors have a choice of what to do. They can go to VOR or not. It does take a little bit of time, obviously, from review preprint to become a VOR. So at the moment, I don't really know whether we have any sort of mitigating actions of, you know, nudging people to declare a VOR. Potentially, that's something that our editorial team will be thinking of doing. But obviously, you don't want to put pressure on people who are going through reviews and trying to do their best. So it's a good question, actually. So I will investigate.
Thank you. Thank you. We did have one at the front as well. Steve.
Thank you very much. Your decision to review is based on, you know, can we get reviewers for this paper, this subject matter? Are there subfields of life sciences where you've kind of learned that actually we don't have a good reviewer pool, and you've then tried to fill that in so that you can ensure you're covering the whole territory eLife would be expected to cover?
Yes and no. I mean, there are obviously, we've got sort of reputation in some areas where we publish more papers. So neuroscience is a strong area where we publish loads of papers. There are certain areas where we are thinking of growing. So for example, climate science is not something that we've published a lot of papers in, but that's a growing area. So we are thinking of expanding, but obviously that all hinges on capacity, and we are very small, and our editorial board, again, is not massive. So we would need to probably shrink some areas in order to grow some areas. But definitely it is something that we potentially will look at to expand. It is all based on capacity, basically. But yes, yeah, potentially, absolutely.